Postal Service celebrates the 50th anniversary of the television debut of Star Trek by officially holding the first day of issuance stamp ceremony for the Star Trek Forever stamps. The series debuted September 8, 1966. The stamps showcase 4 digital images inspired by classic elements of the television program. With an intricate futuristic setting, multicultural cast, and storylines that touched on social issues, the program pushed past the boundaries of popular science fiction and became a worldwide phenomenon.
Well, Star Trek inspires all scientists, right? We basically are all science fiction fans. I mean, that's just a fact. And a world that's so inclusive and so diverse and so based on curiosity is something that I think we really need. So NASA wanted to be part of the USPS stamp release for Star Trek.
We are incredibly proud that the U.S. Postal Service chose Star Trek to honor this year. It's a selective process, and to be their partner is extremely rewarding.
I'm here by myself, and I'm super excited for the stamps. Captain Kirk's my favorite, and I'm so excited for that one and the Vulcan salute. I'm from San Diego, California. Thank you. Going for the Picard look right now.
Been a fan since 1966 when I was 6 years of age. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee.
And tell me, who's like your favorite character?
No question, Mr. Spock. I always loved how he kind of blended the human logical and the Vulcan logic with the human emotion. So I was more Spock-like, I think, in my younger years.
And tell me what you think about these stamps.
The stamps are fantastic. Not only the Forever stamps, but they have Star Trek linked, just part of the American culture. So it's whenever you're going to use one, I'm excited. It was exciting to see Walter Koenig here and to see Chekhov. Really, I've had the best time so far.
And have you seen some of the movies?
I've seen all 13 movies.
All 13?
All 13. I'm a true Blue fan.
You are a true Blue fan.
And as Mr. Spock would say, I always want to live long and prosper.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here today, and I'm proud to be here representing the dedicated men and women of the United States Postal Service. And as Postmaster General, I have the opportunity to honor the people and places and those parts of our culture and history which represent the best of America. For more than 50 years, Star Trek has entertained us, engaged us, and taken us on a tremendous journey, inspiring optimism and a better understanding of the American psyche. Star Trek began as a TV show on September 8, 1966. The first episode, The Man Trap, began on Stardate 1513.1, to be more precise. And admittedly, Star Trek began modestly. As all shows do, it had to find an audience. But the vision wasn't modest. The vision was expansive. Gene Roddenberry saw Star Trek as a hopeful commentary on the world. And his commentary was that humanity and society, not just technology, will evolve and transcend the problems of today. People were captivated and transported by his vision of the future, of how we might live, and of the adventures our future selves might have. Star Trek was bold from the beginning. At a time of great cultural and social upheaval in the United States, the crew of the Enterprise took on issues of race, war, poverty, gender, age, population, and the environment. Against the backdrop of early space exploration and a newly computerized society, they championed humanity in a world that seemed as if it were becoming more cold and uncaring. Gene Roddenberry's vision touched audiences during the 60s, and it continues to resonate with viewers today. But most of all, the world was drawn to an unforgettable crew of diverse characters: Captain James T. Kirk, Mr. Spock, Dr. McCoy, Lieutenant Uhura, Scotty, Sulu, and Ensign Chekhov, who is here with us today. Thank you. At a time when television shows were not fully representative of our diverse society, Star Trek pierced the cultural veil. Gene Roddenberry fought for a show that prominently portrayed men and women of different races in plots that challenged convention. It was a television show that broke the mold. The Postal Service had a notable connection with Star Trek since the very beginning. In that first season, the show had a devoted following, but it was small. Gene Roddenberry thought the show might be canceled. So he helped organize a letter-writing campaign with the Science Fiction Writers of America. Thousands of fans bombarded the network executives with letters. As a result, a special announcement was made on the air that the show had been renewed. Imagine that. The audience was growing in season 2. Yet another letter-writing campaign was launched, demanding the show stay on. Almost 1 million letters were mailed from fans like New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller and authors Isaac Asimov and Harlan Ellison. The Post Office Department, as we were called back then, delivered those letters. And the show survived for a third and final season in 1969. Without those many letters, the show may not have survived long enough to go into syndication. And Star Trek may not have found its global audience that endures to this day. Now, let me add that the traditional letter writing campaign is still a powerful way to affect change. Even in this age of social media and email, if you want to be heard, if you want to be noticed, if you want to make a difference, send a letter. We need the revenue also. And of course, we want you to use a Star Trek stamp. Let me add also personally that there's a Star Trek connection in my family. My older brother, Kevin, used to watch the original run in the 60s. Of course, I was too young at that point. I caught on during syndication. But Spock was my brother Kevin's favorite character. And as he was the oldest and often our babysitter, it became required viewing for all 6 of us when it came on in syndication in the 70s. So if you can imagine, particularly for those of the younger audience here today, the viewing experience was pretty different back then. We were typically on a couch all together, and the youngest, my sister Bridget, she was our remote control. She had to get up and change a channel or adjust the volume. Can you imagine that? So we're sitting on the sofa or on the floor around a large console TV without a remote. But today, obviously, you can enjoy Star Trek episodes from your smartphones and on your tablets. Some of the Star Trek technologies that were once fiction are now reality. Who can say that today's smartphones and tablets weren't inspired on the bridge of the Enterprise? After 50 years, Star Trek is still on the frontier. It still influences, inspires, and entertains. Star Trek has been honored by the Postal Service once before, in September 1999, when the USS Enterprise served as an important symbol of the 1960s in our Celebrate the Century series. To celebrate and commemorate the 50th anniversary of this iconic show, one of the longest-running science fiction franchises in history, we are here today to dedicate our newest United States postage stamps. These stamps feature illustrations of the famous image that we all associate with the Star Trek franchise. On the sheet of stamps, you'll see the words space, the final frontier. These words, set against a background of stars, have launched thousands of journeys enjoyed by billions of viewers for more than 50 years. These are unmistakably the words of Star Trek. You will also notice the words forever and USA. These are the words of the United States Postal Service. It is our way of saying that Star Trek epitomizes the best of America and will always do so forever.
Thank you, everyone. Pretty incredible stamps. Now I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Liz Kolodner, the Executive Vice President and General Manager of CBS Consumer Products. Ms. Kolodner oversees the worldwide licensing and merchandising for Star Trek and many other television brands and series from CBS.
Thank you, Chief. My official bio does not include this information, but I also grew up on Star Trek with my older brother. And so it is my great privilege to now be a steward of this franchise that means so much to so many. We stand today at Mission New York, where thousands of fans across multiple generations gather to celebrate their love of Star Trek. We'll dress in costume and speak Klingon, tour the bridge and the transporter, compete on trivia and video games, and listen raptly to people talk about the essence of Star Trek. The panels will be filled with actors, writers, and designers, educators and scientists, historians from the Smithsonian, even astronauts from NASA, who have been infected and inspired by Star Trek. And almost all of them will get on social media and engage in conversation, because Star Trek is part of who we are. It began as a series, but it has become a phenomenon and a philosophy. Think of the terminology that has become part of our lexicon: warp speed ahead, live long and prosper, make it so. Star Trek changed television by proving that it didn't have to be violent to be exciting, and by showing what wasn't so easily or readily discussed. Star Trek changed lives by showing possibility. When she was a young girl, Whoopi Goldberg saw Lieutenant Uhura as an officer on the bridge of the Enterprise. "I knew right then and there," she has said, "I could be anything I wanted to be." And Star Trek changed the world by changing our perspective as it dealt with complexities of government, the rules of society, the meaning of diplomacy, and the nature of human behavior. It was a show that believed we can be better than we are, and it still teaches us and motivates us toward that goal. If you know Star Trek, and I think you do, you know about the Kobayashi Maru, the training exercise designed to test the character of each Starfleet Academy cadet in a no-win scenario. But Captain Kirk famously found a novel way around the situation because he doesn't believe in no-win scenarios. We are reminded, nonetheless, we are reminded to try to find creative solutions every day. Gene Roddenberry once said, "It is the struggle itself that is most important. We must strive to be more than we are. The effort itself yields its own reward." He also introduced these words which we all know and serve as a guiding principle: to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before. It comes as no surprise that the recent Star Trek movie was called Beyond, and that the upcoming TV series is called Discovery. We are reminded every day to keep struggling and to keep exploring. Star Trek held a belief that the creatures of the universe can coexist in peace, that teamwork is the critical component of success, and that the balance of logic and emotion, represented so brilliantly in Mr. Spock, creates harmony. It has been said that Kirk was the soul, Spock was the mind, and McCoy was the heart of the Starship Enterprise. All were required to make it fly. We are reminded every day to work together. Creativity, effort, exploration, teamwork, these are great lessons and a great gift. On the occasion of Star Trek's 50th anniversary, we commemorate this tremendous legacy. We are particularly thrilled to be doing so with the United States Postal Service.
Now, I'm pleased to introduce our next guest speaker, and that's Dr. Michelle Thaler. She's NASA's Deputy Director of Science Communication. Dr. Thaler is an astronomer and research scientist who directs NASA's public education and outreach efforts. She's also the host of the podcast Orbital Path on public radio and the host of How the Universe Works on the Science Channel. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's please welcome Dr. Michelle Thaler.
Good morning, everybody. What a pleasure to be here. You know, at NASA, we really try to grow our diversity. We try to have lots of different people work at NASA. But you're going to be at a bit of a disadvantage at NASA if you don't get every single Star Trek reference that has already been said today. You know, Kobayashi Maru, all of that. You know, I've thought about writing a book of all the things you should know to work with scientists when it comes to science fiction references. You know, I want to start by talking a little bit about how NASA works with the U.S. Postal Service, because that I think is very inspiring. It's funny to me how random things will inspire humanity to do really incredible acts. And in 1991, there was a set of stamps that the U.S. Postal Service put out that had all of the explored planets of the solar system, had images of Jupiter and Mars and Saturn. And then there was a little artist conception of something called Pluto. There's a dead little cratered world, not very interesting, and it said, not yet explored. And that single little postage stamp, kind of a throwaway stamp, Pluto wasn't explored yet, inspired one of our scientists, Alan Stern, and he became the principal investigator, the lead scientist of the New Horizons mission, which almost exactly a year ago today actually saw Pluto for the first time. And I have to say, there's a lot of working at NASA that isn't very glamorous, but there are moments when you actually return a picture of something you've never seen. Pluto was always out there. It was always out there 4 billion miles away. And all of a sudden it became a place to me last year. There were mountains that were 12,000 feet high made of pure water ice. And there were glaciers made of methane ice. And it was so much more beautiful and so much more alive than I had ever thought. And the children who are born this year are being born into a world where there's always been that view of Pluto as this beautiful, real place. So I was born after the original Star Trek series aired, and I grew up in a world where this universe, depicted in fiction, but very real to you as a child, always existed. There were always these characters that were like family to me. And there were always these stories and this image of inclusion and tolerance. And that was a world that was readily presented to me as I grew up. And as a scientist, one of the things that I think isn't really spoken about a lot, the Star Trek universe is actually driven by curiosity. You send the Enterprise out to explore. It's not based on profit. It's not based on conquest. It's based on pure curiosity. And that in itself was a huge inspiration to me as I grew up. So we have these worlds that are real and that are out there, but we need our imagination to drive us there. So this little postage stamp, right, that said Pluto not yet explored, Alan Stern put that, I don't know if you know this, I bet a lot of you do, he actually put one of those postage stamps on the New Horizons spacecraft. And as it flew by Pluto last year, there was a little USPS postage stamp going by with it. And I'll have you know that now is officially 4 billion miles on one 29-cent stamp. Which is, that's, when you talk about amazing service, there you go, 4 billion miles on 29 cents, that's right. So the U.S. Postal Service has actually released a Pluto Explored stamp as well, and it is beautiful. And it has a real picture of Pluto. And when you think about all of the science, the culture, the technology that I was born into because of Star Trek, not only were there all this diverse crew working together, there were things like smartphones and communicators and warp drives. At NASA, we are actually looking into how you might someday build a warp drive. And was that partially due to the inspiration that Star Trek gave us? We're actually working on how you would build a transporter. For those of you that know something about quantum teleportation, we're working on how that might actually work. So our imaginations also need to take us further into what kind of a society we want to live in. We can imagine the technology, we can imagine this world created. Now let's go further in the way that Star Trek has taught us and imagine a better world that's more inclusive and more accepting and more based on curiosity. And that's the, thank you. You know, for my dissertation, when I got my doctorate, I studied some of the stars in the belts of Orion, and the belt of Orion. And you better believe that I remembered that City on the Edge of Tomorrow quote, where Captain Kirk looks up and he's talking, to Edith, and says, well, I know of a novelist who lives around, on a planet around that star in the belt of Orion. And when you think about the worlds we're discovering, so I actually checked it out, I actually wrote it down or typed it into my phone. As of today, we know of 3,375 confirmed planets around other stars. And we are currently following up on another 5,000 more candidates. And that's the world that the kids today are going to be born into. Yesterday, we announced the discovery of a giant ice volcano on the largest asteroid series. And I'll tell you, we do not know what an ice volcano is doing on an asteroid. That is really, really mysterious and pretty good job security for us because we have no idea what's going on. So, picture these worlds that we can imagine and that we can make real. And ask yourself, what are those worlds that we're going to explore and that we're going to know, not just out around the other stars, but also the one right beneath your feet. And that needs our imagination and our hope, too. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thaler. Now it's a very distinct honor to introduce our next guest, actor, author, playwright, director, and humanitarian, Walter Koenig, known for his iconic portrayal of Pavel Chekhov. Walter Koenig first appeared as Mr. Chekhov during Star Trek's second season, and went on to portray him in all of the feature films starring the original cast. Mr. Koenig is a prolific actor with numerous appearances in shows like Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Gidget, Combat, and in Babylon 5 later on. He's taught classes in acting and directing at UCLA and has written several plays and books, including his autobiography, Warped Factors, A Neurotic's Guide to the Universe. Mr. Koenig also is noted for his humanitarian work on behalf of Burma and the refugee crisis there. Ladies and gentlemen, I know we have a great warm welcome for Walter Koenig.
Thank you very much. The problem with going last and following such an extraordinary, articulate group of people is that everything I was going to say, they said first. So, no, I'm okay. I have on occasion spoken about my age and drew similarities, comparisons, so as to accentuate and to bring home just how old it is, turning 80. But I have a new one. Thank you. As of right now, I have a new one to add. I'm so old that I remembered when you had to use your tongue to mail a letter. When I first saw the word forever on U.S. postage stamps, I had a very extraordinary positive reaction to it. First of all, from a economic point of view, these are stamps you could use no matter how high the price of stamps rose. But also forever, just it says that we're going to be around, that we should anticipate that the world will continue to exist, and all the folks in it will continue to perpetuate, and the future will hopefully be a bright one. We live in a very chaotic time. Again, I'm an old guy. I grew up in the 40s. I was there during the Second World War. And I had thought, I found the 60s both devastating and inspiring. I thought the people rallying for a better world, or to withdraw from a contentious situation where we didn't belong, where our uniform personnel were being sacrificed, was an awful situation. And on the other hand, I was inspired by the folks who stood up and made their voices heard. And Lord, you keep thinking that we're going to learn from all of this, and that we're going to move forward at a more accelerated pace towards the future that Star Trek had anticipated. And it seems to me like we take 1,000 steps forward and 9,999 backward. And I'm waiting for us to go where no one has gone before, a future that we can all embrace ourselves and respect the cultures of others, and know that we are in this together. Forever, for me, implies that. And even though that was not necessarily the meaning when the stamp was first put out, it has that feeling for me. I am a product of another era, and I fully concede that. I confess to it, because I can barely use my cell phone, you know. I do a couple of things, and then I have to lie down. So you're going to always find a supporter in me for the mail. And let these young folks call it snail mail. To me, it's the way to contact the rest of the world. And I thank you so much for thinking of me when you had this commemorative situation here. Thank you very, very much.
And I'm Kristal Hart, reporting from the Jacob Javits Center here in New York City. This is the Star Trek stamps just released. So I hope you've enjoyed the show. Thanks for watching, and hey, mail a letter today and we'll see you at the post office.